Hello, boys and girls. Welcome to Beard Wizard Rants. This was not the plan today. I was going to do a normal review stream like I normally do at 4 p.m. Central when I get home from work and have some fun and drink a beer and enjoy some music. And then somebody started talking about an article today on Twitter, and I started to get interested, and I asked for a link to that article, and I started to read that article. And the more I read that article, the more frankly disgusted I became, frustrated, and strangely unsurprised, not shocked. I told you so. We told you so. I hate that, though. I hate when people say we told you so. We tried to warn people. We tried to tell people. We tried to explain. We tried to talk to people, but people did not want to listen. And now we know why. Now we know exactly why. I printed it out because the link I have, which is in the video description below, if you want to follow along, you can pull that article up if you want to see this article written on Medium by Dr. Cleo. Hold on, let me move my notes. Cleo Bell or Bella, I'm not sure. It's Belle, so it could be Bell or Bella. Weisman wrote on Medium, titled "The Worst People You Have Never Met." Sadly, I've met some of them. Or what I learned during a 4-year academic study of online harassment in the Dungeons and Dragons community. I printed it out because the archive link has a crap load of pop-ups and ads that constantly kept interrupting my reading and getting in the way, and I got tired of it. So I printed it out. Plus, I wanted to write things down. This is 44 pages printed. It's like an hour read according to Medium. When it tells you how long it's going to take to read that article, it's like an hour read. I'm not going to read you the whole thing. I'm not even going to read you a lot of it. There's no point. Read it yourself. I don't want you to take my words about what's in the article as gospel. Read it yourself. I encourage you to read this article. It's a hard read. Some of it is very difficult to read. Some of it is frustrating to read. We're going to touch on some points. I'm going to bring it to you from a perspective of a gamer, because this is the one thing that struck me first is Dr. Weisman, puts her credentials in here. Is she's a psychotherapist. She's interviewed and studied violent criminals and at-risk youth and let's see. Let me not put words in her mouth. I am a psychotherapist and a social research scientist who has worked in maximum security prisons with violent offenders and at-risk youth. I'm glad I remembered that. I have interviewed, studied, and interacted with a wide variety of multiple felons close up for years, and right now I am studying Dungeons & Dragons drama, and what studying it tells me about people frightens me more than any of that work ever has. Now, that may be hyperbole, but, let's take Dr. Weisman at her word and just let that sink in for a minute. Studying the Dungeons and Dragons community frightens her more than interviewing multiple felon violent criminals in prison. Let that sink in for a second. So why am I ranting about this? Why do I have something to say? Well, first of all, the one thing that's not in her credentials, in her here's who I am and here's why this matters, is gamer. And maybe that's an oversight. Maybe she has played tabletop games and she left this out. I don't think you would, though. If you're writing an article about D&D and the D&D community or tabletop community, you would think that if you were a member or you were a gamer, you would put that in there, because that is a very important perspective, I think, that is missing. That's the one thing that we're going to talk about, is something this article is missing. There's some preconceived misconceptions in here. There's some bias in here because of those misconceptions, and I think that stems from her not being a gamer, her not having actually lived in this community for as long as some of us have. So my credentials. I'm a gamer. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. I am a writer. I am a journalist. I am a gamer. I have been a tabletop gamer since I was 14 years old. That would be 1990, 1990 for those of you who are counting, aging myself there. I have been a tabletop gamer since 1990. I did not get in the early days. I was like 2 when D&D came out. But I was introduced in the very early stages of Dungeons and Dragons. I agree, Ray. That is the point. That is a good point about the study. Ray says that's the point of the study. She has to be independent of her study. I would agree. And that's why some of the things in this article are very good, because she's not a gamer. But there's also there's some bias inserted in here because of that, and we're going to touch on some of that bias here in a second. But again, I've been a gamer since 1990. I have played every edition of Dungeons and Dragons, including other games like Shadowrun, BattleTech, Pathfinder, World of Darkness, a multitude of indie games that I can't even remember off the top of my head. I've played Basic, I've played Warhammer. I have played those games. I've been involved in those communities for the vast majority of my life. Over half my life has been in this community. And that, I think, is also an important note that will come into play here in a second. So this article essentially is setting up a study about the harassment and toxicity in the tabletop community, the tabletop industry. That's what kind of shocked me. At first, I thought I was going to read about harassment of gamers against other gamers, or I was going to read about harassment of gamers against people in the industry, and that's not at all what we're getting with this article. This is actually exposing people from the highest level of the community and the industry side against other people in the industry. And it goes to show, again, the toxicity that we all told you was present, that you all said was not, or that didn't believe us because of, frankly, who we are and what we look like. And that's something that we are definitely going to talk about in this rant. Sorry, while I collect my thoughts, I'm still sort of processing this article. Quite a lot of information. The first quote in here I do want to talk about because I think it's a very important admission and a very important sign of the industry. Maria Fanning, who created the tabletop, I don't want to forget the actual name of it. And I'm going to. Something about sword swinging lesbians. Thirsty Sword Lesbians. She created that fantasy game, Thirsty Sword Lesbians. Most of us have heard of it. It's on DriveThruRPG. It's out there. I see it pop up every once in a while. She actually farewell message to the RPG industry, January 2021. I have come to terms with the fact that this scene has a problem with caring more about attacking others for perceived slights than helping victims and doing good. I have participated in it repeatedly. Now, I have participated in it repeatedly and refused to take responsibility for the harm it caused. Me removing myself from the scene is my way of taking responsibility both for myself and the others I have harmed, assisted in doing harm. I am done interacting with a scene that vindicates certain harm when done in self-perceived righteousness, but condemns harm that they consider immoral. So hypocrisy. The hypocrisy of the industry has caused her to leave the industry and admit her own involvement in it, her own condoning of it and participation in it. And I've seen it, and from both a fan perspective and inside perspective as an indie writer, just as a fan, just as a person who plays games. I don't. When it started, when it got really big, 2009, 2010, when the industry, when the fandom started to take this turn where there was this stereotype about people from my era and before about how we were just awful people, and we were, there was this stereotype built around people who look like me, who played games back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, that we were misogynist and sexist and racist, and we were gatekeeping the industry, and we hated people, and blah blah and all this other bullshit. And so I got to experience that, which really drove a sour note into my love of the industry, and it really made me isolate myself with a lot fewer people in the community. I stopped interacting with most people in the fandom, outside the small local groups that I knew and the people that I knew, that I gamed with. And then I experienced it as a creator, in the most overt way I saw it. Now, there's been a few cases where I think I've seen it, but there's no proof. It's just my perception or my feelings. But where I actually saw it in a very overt way is the first year that we did Origins Game Fair. I think it was the first year. I'm trying to remember now. I had advertised in the Origins, like the big Origins group, where all the vendors were advertising, we're coming to the show, here's what we're going to have, here's our booth, blah, blah, blah. You make all these big announcements to try to drum up excitement and whatever for the stuff you're bringing to the show. And I had posted an advertisement for my book, Embers of Liberty, which is a dystopian novel, and in the description it talks about people fleeing to the Republic of Texas. And somebody latched onto that right away and insinuated that because I mentioned Texas in a good light, that people were fleeing tyranny and escaping Texas. Like Ray's reminded, she's got a better memory than I do. It was the first year, and people right away latched onto that and started insinuating things about me and about the book, and about how I must be because I would dare to write a book that shines a positive light on something called the Republic of Texas. And within a few minutes, that post started to take traction, and people started to really get toxic about that. And because I was there with another author, Ray, and I was there with my wife, I had to think about them and the concern that I had that, what if people really did do something that we've all heard stories. We all know of cases of creators and panelists and attendees who have been canceled and who have been disinvited and shunned from these shows. So I took the post down, and I, the part of me who wants to tell those people to go suck it, doesn't like that. But it's not just me that was being affected by it. It was not just me that I was worried about that situation. And then I've seen it bleed over into other people in the industry. You look most closely at Ed Greenwood recently. Ed Greenwood, if you've ever met Ed, Ray and I met Ed this year. Like, I've met Ed Greenwood a couple times in random book signings and just at booths and just talked to him for a minute or two. But Ray and I actually got the opportunity to sit down with Ed Greenwood and talk to him at GameholeCon this past fall. And he is one of the nicest, most genuine, sweet, engaging people that you will ever meet in any sort of professional industry like this. He is such a nice guy. And I don't even remember what it was. He retweeted some post from a game that was being created by a company that people don't like. And they went right after Ed and gaslit him into like, oh, the personal harm and you're hurting people by retweeting a post. And right away, Ed apologized, and he put out this thing, and, I'm sorry I hurt anybody. Ed didn't. If you think Ed Greenwood meant to hurt you, you're a lunatic. Ed Greenwood wouldn't want to hurt anybody. And people were making it out like he was like endorsing genocide. And it's absolutely insane what it caused. So I've seen it. We've seen this happen time and time again. So when I talk about the bias in this article, that's the one thing that I do want to talk about, because I think, while I do agree with Ray that independence from the author of a study is important. You don't want somebody too closely tied to something so that their emotional bias or their love of something or whatever will create bias in the study, so to speak. You want it to be independent. But I think in this case, it's gone the other way. It's gone to the other extreme. Right away, she talks about... she's talking about the history of D&D here, which is very good, very spot on. She talks about created by Dave Arneson and Gary Gygax, 74. It goes into mostly boys and teenagers, and eventually men played the game, which is very true. In the back of game stores and basements, eventually, inevitably, they ran out of friends in the immediate locale, and that's when the internet came along. Miraculously, people started finding each other. But the thing that she throws in here, this is the part that shows her bias in the other direction, where she says, but it also brought in many more people who were not white, straight men. Now, this notion that D&D was somehow a white, straight male hobby exclusively until the internet was created is frankly asinine. My very first D&D game when I was 14 years old was with my best friend and his friend who was black. My very first D&D group in high school had a guy in it who was definitely not white. And to this day, I'm not even sure if Annan was Indian, Asian, Latino, because it didn't matter. We didn't care. My first group that I played with had a woman in it. And one of the groups I currently play with has a woman in it. But that's after the internet, so I can't really use that as an example. But all of those, before we started finding groups on the internet, I've been to gaming groups before all that where you would go to a store and there were women playing. There were people from different ethnicities playing. It depended on where in the country you were. And we moved around a lot because my dad was, with the Bureau of Prisons. So we got moved every few years. And I met a lot of different gamers from a lot of different backgrounds, a lot of different genders and ideologies. But nobody believes us when we say that because of the way I look, which is a little fucking racist to start with, isn't it? But it's not entirely about the article or the writer. I just think that in some cases she puts some preconceived bias in this article. But I do think she's right on a lot of things, and that's why I tend to put more weight into what she said, oddly enough, because she's already coming at this article. She's already coming at this article with a preconceived notion that D&D had always been a toxic environment of racist, misogynist, cis, white, straight, whatever, men. So she's already got that notion. And then she has that viewpoint shattered because the people she believes are the progressive allies, whatever, of her community turn out to be just absolute monstrous toxic people. She even says here, what I found out about how fandoms work, at least when they are at their worst. So she even states right here, when they are at their worst. So she's stating in this article that right now the tabletop community is at its worst. And I would agree for a multitude of reasons, not just the toxicity of the people in this article, but what it has created online, what it has created on social media, what it has created on Reddit, that people just don't want to interact with each other. People like me don't want to interact with anybody younger than us because we don't know. We don't know who's going to turn around and accuse us of something or try to cancel us. And that's what's funny is the word canceled shows up in this article so many times, but how many times have we told there's no such thing as being canceled? Cancel's not a thing. There's no such thing as cancel culture. There's a whole article. There's 44 pages talking about cancel culture. The other part of her bias she goes into, and this one bugs me because she never resolves this preconception. I think this is a lack of awareness on the author's part of this preconception that she talks about. Where'd she go? I was more interested in those who... She's talking about why she wanted to do this study. Because she studied other communities, other fandoms, and she says, I know why I know why right-wingers want to hurt diverse groups of creative people. She wanted to study why do progressives, feminists, and LGBTQ plus folk want to do that. Now, that's another preconceived bias. And that should have been resolved by this article. She should have concluded this article with the realization that being a shitty person is not based on ideology. There are shitty people everywhere. It doesn't matter what wing you come from. So this idea that, well, I know right-wingers automatically, that by default, they just hate diverse people, blah, 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 blah. No, this should have brought you to the realization that shitty people exist everywhere. But it didn't, and that kind of bugs me. Like, that should have been, like, the clue, the ding moment, the light bulb that went off that said, oh, like, yeah, it happens everywhere. All of these people are bad. And then she concludes this part, and this one was kind of a wow moment for me. In many ways, the felons I spoke to in prison were easier to understand. She's talking about she didn't understand why these people do what they do. In many ways, the felons I spoke to in prison were easier to understand and less unnerving to interview. She felt more comfortable interviewing felons than she felt interviewing the freaking head of Gen Con. Yeah, Atkinson's in here. She was more uncomfortable talking to Atkinson than a felon. So the article goes on and it talks about a lot of different things. I even love this part here where she literally brings up, she's quoting Fiona Geist, who's a professional RPG professional with a history of harassment. And quoting her, she says, they're asking... She's talking about Troika and her younger... she's talking about her younger colleagues. Look, most of these people are used to hate mobbing. Like, I'm not trying to say it's right. I'm just saying if you're under the age of 25, your primary experience of the internet has been akin to a schoolyard fight in which someone rings a bell and says, if you're a leftist, get over here. And if you're not, run over there. Basically, if you're not with us, you're against us. It's that whole meme that, like, that guy's standing in the middle and there's people on the other ends, and the people on one side just push the guy and then are like, why are you over there with them? Well, it's because you fucking pushed me. He says there's always an asshole in every group. Doesn't matter. Exactly. Doesn't matter who the group is. It does not matter. And that's what we've been trying to say forever. But no, they'll just say, well, everybody who looks like you or everybody who has a certain political belief. And then this gets right down to the end of it. Why did they do this? And this, again, it doesn't make sense. Conflict is common because, like, on some level, and we all don't like admitting to this, a lot of our ideological conflicts are over resources. We don't like talking about it because really the reason that a lot of us think that certain people are bad, get this through your noggin right here. The reason that a lot of us think that certain people are bad is that they make money that we think should be in our pockets. It's not because they actually think people are bad. It's because they're jealous. It all ties back to some people think they're entitled to what other people have. And so in order to get that, they got to tear that person down. And the easiest way to tear that person down is to cancel them. The easiest way to do it is to make shit up, harass them, and cancel them. And this is where things get absolutely insane. Completely insane. Oh, I love this quote too. So before we jump into what makes this so insane, those of you who have read Dragonlance, hopefully you guys are all fans. If you're not, go read Dragonlance, the Dragonlance saga. There's a quote in Dragonlance, and it's a pretty basic quote, but it's a quote that always kind of stuck with me, that says, evil feeds upon itself. Basically, the heroes are talking about how at the end of the day, the bad side is always going to lose because evil feeds upon itself. Nothing truly evil will ever last because it eventually eats itself alive. And that's what one of these harassers, Kreidner, is being quoted as saying: "We're all determined to be the left that eats itself. We're all determined to be the left that eats itself." I'm not saying the left is evil, but the people she interviews in here, they're pretty freaking monstrous. And yeah, I'm not ashamed to say that. All right, so the meat of this story, the case study, that's the part. Like, it takes. This is on page 10 before we really get to the meat of the story, the case study, and what I want to talk a little bit about here. So she goes into the story of Zach Smith, which, if you guys don't know, some years ago, and I heard about this when it happened, and I didn't think too much of it, because at the time, everybody was being accused of everything. So Zach Smith was sort of an independent content creator, a game designer. Worked trying to see if it talks about Zach Smith's credentials right here. I forget what game, and I don't want to get it wrong. But anyway, Zach Smith. If you don't know, Zach Smith's an independent content creator, and I already said that, game designer, and he was accused by his ex-girlfriend of rape, of abuse, manipulation, you name it. He was accused of all kinds of things by a woman by the name of Nagy, Nagy. And those accusations took off, and from the people who propagated those accusations, admittedly, no facts, no proof. Some of them even admit to they didn't do it because of the accusations. They did it because they didn't like him. They didn't like him for his tone. He did. That's right. He did work on D&D. That's absolutely right. Ray brought that's a very good point, because one of the harassers was Merles, was in charge of Dungeons and Dragons, and had his credits removed from some of the 5th edition stuff that he worked on. Zach was an artist. He was an editor. He did a lot of different things in the industry. Zach's only crime, this whole thing goes through everything that Zach went through, all of the accusations. Dr. Wiseman went through and did research, could not find proof of anything. She could not find any posts. She could not find any evidence. Even when she interviewed people about Zach, and they made accusations about Zach, she disproved everything they said about him, like literally in real time. They were making things up on the spot when she was interviewing them. And then she would be like, well, no, that didn't happen, or he didn't say that, or he didn't write that, or he didn't post that. And they were just literally making stuff up to talk about how they didn't like this guy. They ruined this guy's career. They ruined this guy's life. And why? Because they didn't like him. That's it. And it's not even that they didn't like him for his politics. Zach was right there with all of them as far as his political leanings, his acceptance of pretty much whatever anybody wanted to be or identify as, or who they wanted to. Like, he was all in on what they would consider a progressive liberal ally, and they just didn't like him. So they went through and systematically ruined his life. Atkinson, the head of Gen Con. Merles, in charge of Dungeons and Dragons. There was a reference to one of the harassers being... what was the other one? Oh, Matt Mercer. The guy everybody loves who made that stupid Critical Role show. Matt Mercer. The fucking toxic harasser. Everybody loves him, right? Arthur Chu, I knew he was a piece of crap anyway. All of these people listed in the... I mean, you could Control F this article and put in almost any major name from the RPG industry, from the tabletop industry, and you're going to find them in this article. You're not just going to find them being accused of being an awful person. You're going to find some of them quotes of them saying yes, I did this. And for no good reason. I just did it because I felt like it, because I didn't like the guy. Yeah. December 11th, 2020, Mike Merle sat in a video call with Smith, his lawyers, and King County judge to determine whether he would go to trial for his role in the hate mobbing of Zach Smith. I mean, Merle's put a blurb on Zach Smith's, like they worked together, because Merle's had put up a Facebook post that had basically accused Zach of being a rapist. But the judge had determined that the Facebook the post was vague enough that it couldn't be considered defamation. But Zach is still bringing that case. Like, the case was not thrown out. He can continue to try to bring it. He's just got to give them enough evidence to prove it. Peter Atkinson, multi-millionaire Peter Atkinson, founder of Wizards of the Coast, who owns Dungeons and Dragons and current head of Gen Con, the biggest convention in the industry, is one of the ones who was defaming this guy, Zach Smith. Zach Smith's only crime, he, like, actually literally the only thing anybody came forward and said that he legitimately did that they didn't like is he was too hard on, he ran a forum where if you wanted to post accusations, you had to prove it. So people didn't like that he made them tell the truth. That's Zach's crime. Zach Smith's crime is being honest. And a bunch of shitty monsters ruined his life. Zach Smith is something of a cottage industry now. Before I go any further, here's a few basics. He successfully sued his harassers for defamation 3 times in 3 countries. So the defamation case, like, is legit. He won 3 times in 3 countries. He literally is right about that. The case, which ended with the harasser admitting, after 2 years, I've found no proof that he did anything wrong online or offline. One of the cases, after 2 years, I found no proof. And that man admitted that he had access to as much evidence as anybody ever had. There was never a single screenshot, text, email, recording, or other document meaningfully used as evidence in Smith's guilt for all the accusations from his former girlfriend. Excuse me. And then she goes into, where'd she say it? So in all of this, so the Dr. Weissman interviewed everybody involved, could not really interview the woman that did this, that accused him. But she says right here, her closest friends, meaning Nagy, the accuser, her closest friends at the time have claimed it was Nagy who abused Smith. Even the ones who were not there when she punched him in the eye. This is like the Johnny Depp case all over again. There's extensive video footage available of the couple doing everything from taking vacation, having sex, to, of course, playing D&D. Tells a story matching tales told by Smith's many real-world defenders, not Nagy's. So all of the video evidence you can find supports him. And still, to this day, even when Weissman wrote this article and did this research, to this day, those people still say Smith is wrong. They just don't like him. That's why they did it. And they will make up reasons to hate him. Told you so. Where did you get this part? So, something that's familiar too in this article. So that, like, we get through to the end of Smith's thing, and this is where they're talking about the biggest thing that they could find that they hated Smith for was in his Discord forum. He said there couldn't be any misinformation. If you posted something, you had to be able to prove it. You had to be able to back it up. The woman who took that, I think it's a woman, Scogan, who took that overturned that rule and said, oh, we care more about people's being able to vent than people being honest. So they threw that out. And she wrote, Scogan hated this way of thinking, the way of being honest, basically. She hated that Smith wanted people to be honest. More precisely, she hated its effect on her friends. they just wanted to act like the rest of the internet, casually accusing each other of being terrible every day and not proving it, and then pretending it never happened. Does that freaking sound familiar? Like, I wouldn't be surprised if in a few years they don't have a mental illness category for this exact thing. Wanting to, like, it's almost like a compulsion. Like, going around and accusing people of being awful, trying to get them canceled with no proof whatsoever. And then when you turn around and prove it, they act like, oh, no, I was just pretending, or we were just joking or whatever. Like, there's got to be something that drives these people to do this kind of thing. It feels like it's some sort of strange compulsion. I don't understand it other than envy. Again, like, they feel like they're entitled to other people's success or other people's money. They're jealous. It's envy. They want what they didn't create, so they decide they're going to take it from somebody else. This is a really long article, let me tell you, boys and girls. So then we get to, again, the end of the article. And this is where she wraps up most of the article, but she never sort of resolves that preconception that she had, that well, of course we know why people on this side of the aisle or people on this side of the fence are this way, but I was shocked to find out people on this side of the fence are that way. And she never sort of brings it full circle to that, well, it's everybody. This exists among everybody. She just never gets to that point, and that just kind of drove me absolutely nuts. And then I think this is the last point I had about the article itself. She said, believing it or not believing it, this is sort of her wrap up. What about Shu Skogan's dream? Is the RPG, this is the thing that kind of gets me, and it makes me kind of sad. Because, again, I grew up in this community. I was 14 years old when I started playing D&D. I was still developing as a person, as a man, I was still a child. And I grew up with this for all intents and purposes during the most formative years of my life. And this developed my worldview of inclusiveness and camaraderie and, working together and being a part of something. And that's why these kinds of things hit so hard for me and others like me, because this is something we genuinely grew up with and love. This is a part of us. This is something that is just part of what we are. It's part of what makes us who we are. So when we see things like this hurts. This really does. Ray says she did say she was afraid to publish the article for fear of people denying the things. And yeah, she did. That's a very good point. She waited to publish this article. She was afraid of the backlash. She was afraid of people who would deny it existed. That's why she includes, and in the article, that's why I encourage you to read it yourself, there are the audio recordings of the people saying the things. So you can't accuse her of making this stuff up. She's worried about being canceled because of this exposure. Again, if cancel culture's not real, why did we just have a 44-page article about it in which the author is afraid of being canceled? The people on her side of the fence have been telling us for years that there's no such thing. You're not being canceled, it's just the consequences of your actions. But the word, I'd be willing, I'm going to do it here in a minute. How many times does the word cancel show up here? But when she asked Shu Skogan, who took over Zach Smith's Discord, is the RPG community a warmer, happier place without Smith? Short answer, no. It is in many ways harder and harsher than ever. I thought all of the new fans, I thought all of the new stuff, I thought everything that has been coming out in the last 10 years was supposed to make D&D and the tabletop community more inclusive, more progressive, more cuddly, whatever you want to say. And no, even somebody inside, somebody who is in charge of part of this community in an important role, I would say, says no, it's worse than ever. So I was curious, how many times? Canceled's not a thing. How many times does cancel show up in this article? 16 times the word canceled. 16 times. I don't use the same word 16 times. Not a word like that in a novel. So before I conclude and sort of gather my thoughts, Ray had said something to me before I started this, and I'm glad she's here because I'm going to credit her with this article. And I feel exactly the same way. As I was reading this article, I didn't put it into these words, but when she said it, I'm like, this is exactly how I felt reading this. Because, again, we go to conventions. That may be something I didn't say in my credentials. I've been a gamer for a long time. I'm also an author. I have been going to pop culture conventions as a creator for several years now. I have been going as a fan longer than that. I think my first Gen Con was in 2019. My first C2E2 was in 2015. Well, not C2E2. My first Wizard World was in 2015. I think. No, 2009. Holy crap. 2009 was my first Wizard World. I still remember the sketch I got the first year, and it was signed 2009. So when I say that this hurts, you have to understand that this is a huge part of my life. Ray said it makes you not want to be a part of it. It does. Reading this right here makes me want to just give up. It makes me want to stop making games. It makes me want to stop going to conventions. We've got tickets to Gen Con this year. But if Pete Atkinson is this kind of disgusting monster, why? But she continues, maybe we can be a positive influence. That's what Ray said to me. And that's exactly how I feel. Reading this 44 pages, reading this right here and making notes on this makes me want to stop. It makes me never want to go to another convention again. It makes me want to only game with the smallest group of people that I know here locally and never talk to anybody online about it again. But maybe we can be a positive influence on this. So what now? What should happen? I don't know. You know, there are criminally awful people running the companies that create the things in the industry we love. Peter Atkinson is a disgusting human being. I hesitate to call him a human being, but he is, because human beings can be horrible people. Mike Merles, a horrible human being. Mercer, I know you guys love him with his hair and his voices and his show. He's a piece of shit. Exactly, Ray. By indie. But even some of the people in here are indie creators. Some of the people in here are small press gamers and creators and designers. They're working for those little companies that have those little booths on the side of Gen Con that nobody's heard about. They're in here too. But what should happen? I don't know. I think customers, I think those of us who have money need to vote with our wallets. I've been telling you for years that WotC is not a company you should be doing business with, yet people still buy their shit. They're in here. Pathfinder. I love Pathfinder. We're playing Pathfinder right now. They're in here. I don't know, guys and gals and boys. I don't know. But you should read the article. You should vote with your wallet. You should do what's right for you and your group. Stop spending money. The old phrase, stop giving money to people who hate you. And it doesn't just include people like me. Here's proof. Right here, 44 pages of it. It's not just people like me they hate. Zach Smith. You go through Zach Smith's bio. Dude is literally everything that they are supposed to love. They hate him too. They don't care if you're gay. They don't care if you're straight. They don't care if you're bi. They don't care if you're trans. They don't care if you're a furry. They don't care if you're poly. They don't care. They hate you because you have something they want, whether it be money or success or whatever. Stop giving money to people who hate you. This fucking community is disgusting. Read the article. God, I could barely get through the damn thing. It pissed me off so much. I could probably go on longer and longer with that, but there's no point to it. Please read the article. Don't just take my word for it. Educate yourselves. Vote with your wallet. Make decisions for yourself, but make informed decisions. And stop letting them divide us. Because I guarantee you, I don't care where you come from. I don't care who you are. I don't care what you look like. If you play games, and you roll dice, and you make stories, and you have a good time, that's it. That's all that matters. I don't care about anything else. And I guarantee you that the vast majority of us that look like me feel the same way. We do not care. As long as you're having fun. But apparently these people care. The people you're buying shit from care. So think about that. Ray, everybody else who was here, thank you so much. I'm not going to go on too much longer. That was long enough, I think. Check out the links. I linked the article in the description below. Subscribe to the channel. I didn't want to push that at first, but if you're still listening, please subscribe. And come back for more. I'll see you guys all again soon. You have a great one. Much love. Many good games. Good luck on your dice. I'll see y'all again soon. Bye.